Here we have it, the solution design for the Humanitarian Challenge edition of Bot Games. So let's take a quick look at the challenge that we're going to be completing today. Now, the Humanitarian Response Challenge is all around supporting a non-profit charity to be able to provide clothing, an essential emergency item. Now, what we need to do to build our automation is begin by downloading our data, this spreadsheet just here. Now, this spreadsheet that we're downloading, this is going to contain the data that we need. So this is going to be clothing size, the city, the email address, how old they are, first and last name. General bits of data that we need on this person to be able to provide the adequate response that we need. Now, our automation, once we've downloaded this data here, we're going to use this data to fill in the recipient details, entering the first name, the last name, email address, and city. We need to make sure we select the correct radio button here, whether it's small, medium, or large, depending on the data. We need to select the state from the drop-down. But one key thing to keep your eye on is this date of birth just here. Depending on where you're located, your date format may be slightly different. If you're like me, and you're coming from England, your date is going to be day, month, and year. But we can see here that this date of birth is specifically requesting month, day, and year. So when you go to tackle this challenge, make sure you keep that in mind. Check the format within your Excel file and make sure that it can match what we're after here. So, without further delay, let's jump straight in. Okay, so let's jump into the Humanitarian Response Challenge. So for this, I am going to be using the Community Edition. If you are using the Enterprise Edition, that will work perfectly fine as well. So I'm just going to log in here. And then from here, I'm going to go straight to create a bot. I'm going to name this bot the Humanitarian Challenge. And then that takes us straight to our workbench. Now, just before we get started, I'm going to take a quick look at the Humanitarian Response Challenge that we're going to be doing today. So we're going to begin by downloading our spreadsheet, and this is what holds our data. With this data, we're going to use this to populate the recipient details, inputting the data into all of these fields here, selecting an option from the drop-down, and then selecting one of the corresponding radio buttons, depending on the clothing size that's fit within the data. Also remember, the date of birth that it's asking for here is month, day, and year. I would recommend everybody that is outside of the US to check your spreadsheet when you download it. Depending on where you're at, it could change the way that this data is given to you, depending on the settings. So that's something to just keep in mind. Okay, so I'm going to leave this page open to give me quick access to the links that we're going to need. And I'm going to go back to our workbench. So the first step in creating the Humanitarian Response Challenge is to open up the website, download that data set, and then access the data. So to make sure that my automation is structured, I'm going to use a step. If I select step and drag this into here, I'm going to call this step open browser and access data, as the actions that we're going to put inside of this are going to do just that. So I'm going to move over to a flow view now, but don't worry if you prefer to develop in list. So the first step is to open up our website. So in the actions pane, I'm just going to type in browser. Now, before I drag my open action from browser, I'm going to go over to this Humanitarian Response Challenge page, and I'm just going to copy this URL. Now I'm back at my workbench, I'm going to select open, and I'm just going to drag this inside of my step. Now I want to make sure that regardless of the system that I execute this automation on, it's always going to use Google Chrome. So in the parameters on that right hand side, we're just going to select the drop down on browser and change default browser to Google Chrome. Don't worry if you're using any of the other browsers for this. Google Chrome is just my preference. In the link to open, I'm going to paste the Humanitarian Response Challenge and then press save. Now the next step is we want to download that file. Now the way that we're going to be building this automation today, it may be different to the way that you've built this previously. There are countless of ways on how we can actually develop this automation. But with regards to this, I'm just showing you a few best practice techniques. So rather than manually pressing on the download button here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click, I'm just going to press copy link address. And that will give us the direct download link. Now in these browser actions that we've got on the left hand side, you'll see that we have the action called download file. I'm going to select download file and I'm just going to put this underneath our browser open. Now the URL of the file is that URL that we have just copied. So I'm going to paste that directly into here. And then we can decide where we want to save it. So I'm going to press browse. Now what I've done is I've got my structured humanitarian response folder here. So I manually created this. Inside here I have the assets and I've previously downloaded the humanitarian response challenge manually just so that I could take a look at that data set. I'll show you all what that data set looks like. From here, I'm just going to press this and I'm going to press open. And now we're going to make sure that that download is saved to that location. Now I would also recommend pressing the overwrite existing file button. By pressing this, we can make sure then that we're always using the most up-to-date data. Now the next step is we're going to use Excel Basic to open up that data set that we have just downloaded. Now before we do that, I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to show you this data set. So here is the data set that we're going to be using. We have all of these columns that all have headers that we can use to identify the data that we want to work with. We can see here that the data is all in a structured format, meeting all of the conditions that we need. So I'm just going to close this off now. Okay, so the next step is let's open up our data. So I'm going to type in open in the actions pane. Now, because I don't need to interact with this data from an application perspective, I don't need to have Excel open. So I'm going to use Excel Basic for this. Just going to drag Excel Basic underneath my download file option. And then from here, I'm going to point it to the file that I'm going to be downloading. So I'm just going to press desktop file and browse. I'm going to go to my humanitarian response page and I'm going to select the humanitarian response challenge. Now our data does contain headers, so we want to select the sheet contains a header option so we can use these to identify the data we want to use. And then for our Excel session, I'm going to select local session and in here I'm just going to enter default so that it links up with our other Excel Basic actions. From here, I'm going to press save. Perfect. So at this point then, we're opening up our challenge page, we're downloading that data, and then we're opening up that data in the backend to make it accessible for us. Now this is a perfect point to run your automation. So if you have that humanitarian response challenge page already open, or that data set, let's close it off at this point and press run. What this will then do is open up our challenge page in a new window, and then we can start getting ready to interact with it. It will also make sure that there's no issue with did download, and it will ensure that we've got the most up-to-date data set. Perfect. So our bot has run successfully. So the next step then is to start interacting with this web page. In the actions pane on the left hand side, we're going to begin by structuring our automation with another step. Now this step is to loop and insert data. So now I know inside here, this is what's going to be in charge of processing our data. So my first step is I want to initiate a loop. I'm going to select loop, drag this loop action I'm just going to place it inside my new step. Now, in the parameters on the right hand side, we want to state what it is that we're going to loop through. So I'm going to select loop. I'm going to enter Excel, which makes the list a little bit shorter. And then I'm going to select Excel Basic. Now from this, we want to loop through all the rows, and our session name of default matches our Excel Basic open action, so no changes needed there. But underneath, we do need to assign the current value to a variable. So for this, we're just going to press that X that's encapsulated in brackets. We can see here that we have the name of Excel row. Now this worked perfect because we know then that this data is the current active row in our Excel dataset. But what I am going to do is at the start of this name is just put a lowercase r, and this just means it's easily identifiable as a record variable within the Variables tab. From here, I'm going to press Create and Select. Perfect, and then Save. So now that this is going to loop through and give us our data, we can start interacting with our web page. So in the Actions pane on the left, I'm going to type in Recorder. We expand that recorder action, select capture, and I'm going to drag this inside my loop. From here, I'm going to select application in the parameters on the right hand side, and I'm just going to press that circular arrow to refresh the windows. This just allows the bot agent to detect what applications we have available to work with. Now in the Choose an Application window, I'm going to select the option of Humanitarian Response Challenge. Then from here, I'm going to select Capture Object. This will open up our Humanitarian Response Challenge page. Now the first step, the first input box that we've got is first name. So I'm going to click on first name. And now we want to state what we want our automation to do. So that is, we want it to set text. So on the action to take on object dropdown, I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to press the option of set text. Now the text that we want to use is the text that's located inside our Excel file that we downloaded previously. So to access this, I'm just going to press the Insert a Value button, and on the drop down and choose a variable, I'm selecting Excel row. Now remember, our dataset had them column headers, and luckily for us, these column headers are a perfect fit for the data that's there. So what I mean by that is, I know that the record, the header for the datasets that's holding the first names is literally just called first name. So because it has a column header of first name, I'm going to enter first name and then press yes, insert. Just like that. And then save. So now that that's saved, we're going to be using a few more recorder actions. So for this, you could record a sequence of steps using the start recording option at the top. You could manually keep adding the capture option. And another option is to press the three dots next to the action that we've just configured. Press copy action. And if we press the three dots again, we can press paste after action. Doing this means that the window is already selected, and because we're using the same application, all we need to do now is press Recapture Object. Once we've pressed Recapture Object, we can now go over last name and click. Now it does keep the same configuration, but because we know the column header for the last name data is just last name, all we need to do in the enter keystrokes input is remove first and enter last. So now we have last name. Alternatively, you can just delete all of this and reselect the variable. But once that's done, press save. Perfect, so now we need to capture the second input box. I'm just going to press them three dots again next to our latest recorder action and press paste after action. From here, I'm going to press Recapture Object again. And then I'm going to select the email input box. Just like before, within the enter keystrokes part, I'm going to delete first name. And I'm going to change this to email, because email is my column header for where it stores the email addresses. And then from here, press save. Now remember, if you're ever unsure on any of these column headers, simply check your dataset. They will all be in there. And once again, I'm going to press these three dots, press paste after action. I'm going to select the recapture object option. And this time we want to capture the city. So just capture the city input box. I'm going to remove the first name from our keystrokes and enter city. From there, I'm going to press save. Now the next step is we want to capture the state. Now this is a different option for us. We're not going to be setting text. We're going to be selecting an option. So I'm still going to press these three dots and I'm going to select paste after action. And then I'm going to press recapture object. And now I'm going to go to select a state. I'll select a state. And now you will see that our original action to take on object has disappeared. And this is because we can't set text into a combo box. So I'm going to select the option here. And I'm going to select the option of select item by text. In the assign value, we're just going to press insert a value. Select our Excel row. And then we want to pull it from the column that is holding our data. So we know this has a column header of state. So I'm just going to enter state. From here, press yes, insert. Awesome. And now press save. Okay. So the next step is we have three separate options. Our customer may have a clothing size of small, medium, or large. So we need to select the correct option dependent on their size and what it says in our data. So to do this, we are going to use if conditions. So in my actions, I'm going to select if, expand the if option, and drag my if condition, placing it just underneath my recorder capture. In the parameters on the right hand side, we want to select our condition. Now this is a string that I am checking. So I'm going to enter string. I'm going to select string condition. Now our source value is the string that we're pulling from our Excel dataset. So for this, I'm going to press insert a value. And on the choose a variable dropdown, once again, I'm going to select Excel row. From here, we want to insert the by name. So the column header for this is clothing size. So I'm just going to enter clothing size. And then press yes, insert. Now we wanted to perform an action or hit the small radio button if our value is equal to S. So we can keep the operator as equals to, and then we'll have the target value as S. From there, we'll press save. Now I also know that I need my if conditions for if it's a medium and if it's a large. So before I go now and create my recorder action for what I want to do for this if condition, I'm going to create the remaining if conditions that I need. So I'm going to select my else if, and I'm going to drag this just to the right of my current if. Once again, on the condition, I'm going to select the drop down, and I'm going to enter string, and select string condition. In my source value, once again, that's going to be the data from our Excel dataset. So I'm select the drop down and I'm going to press Excel row. In the by name, we're going to enter clothing size. And then press yes, insert. This time we want to see if it equals to medium. So the target value is going to be medium. And then from here, we're going to press save. Now, because we only have three options, small, medium, and large, we don't need to add another condition. Instead, we can just select the else action and drag this to the right of our else if. Perfect. Now, because that's an else, we don't need to set up any configuration for that. So now we can jump straight into creating our recorder actions in order to tell our automation what to do when it comes across these sizes. So in the actions pane, I'm going to enter recorder. I'm going to select the recorder dropdown, and I'm just going to drag my capture into my first if statement. From here, I'm going to select the application. Select the drop down on choose an application window and select the previously selected Humanitarian response challenge. From here, I'm going to press capture object. I'm going to move my cursor just over the small radio button. I say small radio button, the radio button with the small size next to it, and click. From here, the action to take on object is simply just click. That's all we need. From there, press save. So just like before, I'm going to press them 3 dots on my recorder capture that I've just configured. And I'm going to copy this action. I'm going to move over to my else if, press the 3 dots, and then I'm going to select the option of paste inside action. This time, I'm going to select recapture object. And now I'm going to select the radio button that has the M next to it. Perfect. Now there's nothing left to configure on this, so I'm just going to go straight over to my else, press them 3 dots again, and then press paste inside action. From here, I'm going to press recapture object. And now I'm going to select the radio button next to L. Once that's selected, press save. Perfect. So now we have all of our conditions in, ready to be able to manage regardless if it's small, medium, or large in size. So the next part is to add in our date of birth. So we've already searched for our recorder action, so I'm just going to select capture, and I'm going to drag this just underneath all of my if conditions, but make sure it is still inside that loop. From here in the parameters on the right hand side, I'm just going to select the application toggle button. Select the drop down on choose an application window, and just like we've done throughout all of this, we're going to select the Humanitarian response challenge. From here, press capture object, and then we're going to set the date of birth input box. Now I know I said this previously, but please make sure you check the format of how your data is stored within your Excel dataset. Depending on your location, the format of this could be different. So once you've checked that, we're going to click and capture our date of birth. From here, I'm going to select the option on action to take on object. I'm going to select set text. And in my keystrokes, I'm going to press insert a value, set the drop down, selecting Excel row. And then in the by name, because I know it's got a column header of date of birth, I'm going to enter date of birth. And then press yes, insert. From there, I'll press save. Perfect. So what we've done there now is we've entered all of the data. So now we need our automation to press the add button in order to store our data. So I'm going to press the 3 dots next to our previous recorder action, and I'm just going to press paste after action. With our new recorder action, I'm going to select recapture object. I'm going to move my cursor over the add button, and I'm just going to click. From here, all we want it to do for this button once it's added the data is click it. So our action to take on object is going to be click. And now press save. Awesome. So now the final part of this automation is to press the submit button, but only once all of our data has been processed. So before I set that up, I'm going to use one final step, just to make sure that my automation is structured. And this makes it easier as well for any other developer that needs to come in and work on what it is that you've previously developed. It tells the story of your automation and guides the developers along. For this step, I'm just going to call this submit, because the purpose of this is to just press that submit button. From there, I'm going to type in recorder again in my actions pane, select my capture action and place it into my final step. From here, I'm going to configure this by pressing the application toggle button underneath window, selecting the drop down and selecting our humanitarian response challenge page, and then I'm going to press capture object. From here, I'm going to hover my cursor over submit and then click. Finally, let's select what we want our automation to do, and that is click that submit button. So on the action to take on object, we're just going to press click. Awesome. So from here, I'm going to press save. And there we go. So just before we go through and execute our automation, let's have a quick recap. So for this, I'm going to move over to the list view. So we begin by opening and downloading our data. Once we've opened and downloaded our data and the challenge page, we then loop through our data, inserting all of the correct data into the correct fields. Depending on the size we come across, whether it's small, medium or large, our automation will click the correct radio button. And once it's then finished inserting all of the data, it will then press add, continuing back to the start. Once it's then processed all of the data in our data set, it can then go down, come out of the loop and press our submit button. Okay, so before we execute our automation, what I want us to do, move your cursor over Google Chrome and make sure that you do not have the Humanitarian page open. Also make sure that your data set is closed if you've previously opened this. But from here, we're going to press run. We can see here it's downloaded the data, and now it's inserting the correct pieces of data into the corresponding input fields. Now remember, there's multiple ways on how you can build automation. The way that I see it, it's like writing a book. If you have 10 people in the room and you give all of these 10 people an ending of a story, and this story needs to end like this, all 10 people will achieve the same result in regards to the ending that it has. But the start and the middle would be totally different in the way that they achieve that ending. And it's the same with automation. We use the recorder in order to go through them input fields. You could have used keystrokes, tabbing through the fields because it is a structured form. You could use JavaScript package to actually use this to insert the data and fill the form directly. The possibilities are endless. Like I said, you could use the sequence recorder to go through and manually record all of these in one single sequence. From here, I'm just going to press the minimize. We see now your bot has run successfully. So congratulations. Now in that humanitarian challenge page, make sure that you get your certificate. Share this on LinkedIn. And make it so everybody knows that you have completed the Humanitarian Response Challenge. But I hope you've managed to find a way and you've managed to complete this successfully. If your automation didn't execute successfully, take a look at the logic I've got here. But if it did, this is where I'll challenge you. Try and get a better time. Have a look at the different methods you can use in order to achieve this. And hey, if you post your certificate on LinkedIn and you achieve a better time, show that off. Show it off that you have managed to even improve what you've done previously. So I hope that you found that helpful, and I hope that you've managed to get this humanitarian challenge executed perfectly. Thank you.